So I have a question for you.
Okay. Ooh.
Going back to those ECW days, the first two, I'll go ahead and mention his name. The first two to do it in America was Ian and Axel, right?
Yeah.
What was the reaction backstage when those two started doing that?
We were well. Keep in mind, ECW. We'd already seen a little bit of crazy, not that crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet.
I mean, so ECW was a hardcore federation.
Yes.
That was deathmatch.
Right.
So what was the reaction from everybody back there?
For me, I usually sitting at the grill position, I was more concerned that nobody's getting hurt because the glass and the all that kind of stuff. It was you always have that concern anytime somebody's pushing that envelope, whether it's New Jack diving off somebody or something. Taz throwing somebody on their head or whatever. Those are the things you have to always be cognizant of. And that's what I was always tightened on and watching. You're like herking jerking with them, watching them. But it was pretty clear that Paul at that point, because Paul was not a talker, like in the sense of, hey, let's sit down and talk about your next 6 weeks, Pondo. Mm-hmm. He just didn't do that kind of stuff, mostly because he's doing it on the fly.
Right.
But I turned that around in my favor because I thought, if he's not willing to tell me, then I'll fill in those blanks. Yeah. And that's exactly what he wanted, like for us to take some of that burden. And to me, honestly, that was like the most liberating time in my career, because up to that point, you're always told, okay, you got 7 minutes, you're going to do this for the heat spot, here's how he's going to beat you. And it was just like you're regurgitating out of people's things. Suddenly, Pondo could be Pondo and do what Pondo wants to do. And it was just, so the flavor was there, but I think it would have been, if we didn't have like Paul and steering it the way he was, that it might have taken a little bit longer, not necessarily to catch on, but for any network to even think about putting it on the air.
Gotcha.
And it's just those things.
Is that why it was on like at 3 or 4 in the morning all the time? Because I would stay awake.
Sure. I got a good story for you for Paul. So Paul, I've been nagging him. We were doing gangbusters in Philly, Queens, Fort Lauderdale. Yeah. I said, Paul, you've got to get to Pittsburgh. It's a wrestling town, And finally, after about a year, a little more, he said, okay, go ahead and set it up. So Cody Michaels and I went. It was mostly Cody. And we set it up, and they came back with 3 time blocks. Friday night at like 1 or 2 a.m., Saturday morning at 10 a.m., or Saturday. So I took the Saturday morning one, right?
Yeah.
Paul called me, what the fuck are you thinking? We'll be on the air, and by the end of that broadcast, we'll be off the air, And so it was just like a whole lot of, like, I'm sure you're aware, like Paul would always try to slide, not always try, he would try and succeed at doing things that were really shady legally, using like November Rain. I'm sure Axl Rose and a few other people would be like, hey, what the fuck are you using our music for,
Yeah, exactly.
But it somehow worked in that insane little bingo hall company.
So there's 2 parts to this question. So that was the first part. If you think about this, they were the first 2 to do death matches in America.
Yes.
So then,
I didn't know that, but when you said it, I'm sure if anybody would know, you would know.
Yeah, they were the first 2. Then Ian either got fired or quit. If you talk to him, he quit. You talk to everybody else in the world, he got fired. So, and then I became number 3 in America. And I don't.
And who was that with?
With him.
Okay.
Because once he left there, right. I found him. I scoured until I found him, because I had all them Japanese videotapes. I'm like, man, this is what I can do. This,
right.
Yep. So what I'm gonna ask you is, because you was part of the office, right?
In ECW?
Yeah.
The dirty little secret is I was not.
Really?
I promoted for them. And I think it was mostly that Paul, and why, I have no idea.
Okay.
But Paul never.
So my question is, I thought you was in the office, but my question was going to be was he fired or did he quit?
I believe fired. It was, and the only reason I say this is because we had the Extreme Rising show was a few months later up in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And he had not been booked. We had the card was already made out, and feeding off some of the things we had in the earlier show, so we had to have these particular sets of matches. He had come to the building in Cleveland, And he asked me to be on the show. I said, bro, I'm sorry. I'd love to get you on. I said, we can't. Everything's split up. Everybody's married. And he kept gnawing at it. Not being a pain in the ass, not being a dingleberry, just, but could we do this maybe? Or could we do that? And I'm never going to fault anybody looking for work, right? It's the ones that don't want to work, the ones that will get it for me. But he came to me and I said, look, I've got one spot. The only spot that's open is Flaming Tables match with the Dudleys. It's done. I'll take it. And so we put him out there, and the whole thing almost went catastrophic. As far as a match goes. He came back and he said, "I'll explain the catastrophic comment in a second." He had come back. He had gone to the car and came back in with his bag and things, and there were thumbtacks and they were like pushing out, getting everything ready, And he all of a sudden disappeared. And I said, Cody Michaels was my assistant. I said, have you seen Axel anywhere? He goes, Ian, I'm sorry, chair shots. And he said, no, he goes, I'm going to take a sweep. I went and talked to Ronnie from Atlas, and nobody knew where he was. And I'm thinking, boy, if he pulled out on this, because we'd already gotten screwed in the Sabu match when Sabu went down. Yeah. Then PJ, right after went down, and then this. And so it was really, we had to figure something out with it and how to pull it back together. And Paul, if you've worked for Paul, right?
No.
Oh, really? I thought you had at some point.
No, everybody thinks so, but no, I never did. No.
Wow. So you learned something. Remember, this is my mantra about this. I learned something new about friends of mine for 30, 40 years that I've never heard before.
I did one thing for ECW you might remember, but go ahead and finish your story, and then I'll tell you that.
Nice. Paul wanted to be the booker and the boss 9 to 5 till Friday at 5 o'clock. And what I mean by that is there were things that were going on where the boys were given the liberties and they would take it. Where, let's say you and I were having a hardcore match, and I would go to Paul and say, but Paul, Philly's too close to Pittsburgh. I can't put Pondo over, whatever. And you say the same thing. It creates this kind of tension. It's just a cancer.
Right.
But it wasn't until I left the WWF and came back from WWF that I started putting, there were suspicions why is he won't talk to me. He doesn't, he always has Taz over there, Sabu over there, Terry over there, never has me over, that kind of thing. And he had made all kind of comments early on that if I had my choice of Ric Flair in his prime, and so, and I'm like, okay, Paul, just back off that kind of stuff a little bit. The only thing I could figure is being raised in Scarsdale, New York, and his dad was a big time attorney for a lot of that stuff. And I was right of center. And that's the only thing I can ponder, because there was never a time that I'm aware of that we had heat or any issues. And I, to this day, I don't think I've never figured out why. But